My friends, this is the MountainSmith Lichen Peak Bivy tent, and today I'm passing on my review of this very interesting shelter. As you may know, I like bivy tents for stealth camping purposes, so I'm always on the lookout for a good stealth camping tent. Because this tent looked promising, I went ahead, purchased it, and I've been testing it out for the last 7 months. In this episode, I'm passing on my agenda-free review. Before we get started going over this product, I need to say this, everybody. This channel is agenda-free. I purchased this with my own money. This is not sponsored. I don't care if you buy this. If you do, great. It makes no difference to me at all. I test out gear, share my opinions, and you can do what you want to do. I'll tell you what, everybody, I'm going to set up the tent real quick and then we'll go over the features and the stats concerning this shelter. With the tent being set up, let's go over some of the features real quick. This is a non-freestanding tent, meaning that you have to stake this thing out to get it to stand up. We have one door, and as you can see, it's fairly good size. And the tent does feature a bathtub floor. When it comes to the materials of the inner here, it is a combination of mesh and fabric. To be honest, this tent is rather strange for multiple reasons, and that's one of them. You have mesh panels and fabric panels all over this tent. With this being a 3-season tent, unfortunately the fabric panels limit airflow and ventilation. On the front of the tent, we have a large panel of fabric and a small strip underneath the mesh at the door. On the side here, mesh, fabric, mesh. The way that the company has staged mesh panels with fabric panels is rather strange. An additional oddity for this tent is the overall shape of this tent. At the footbox it looks somewhat normal, but at the front of the tent, at the top of the tent, it is anything but normal. You have all sorts of strange stakeout points, and the overall geometry of this is weird. For an example, everybody, this line right here is very sharp. Then you have a small angle here, and then it goes back towards the footbox on that side. The overall shape of this is unlike anything I've ever seen before. And to be honest, I have no idea why the company did this. Here we have the door, and here we have the inside of the tent. As you all can see here, you have quite a bit of space inside of this shelter, far more than it appears on the outside. You have plenty of space down at the footbox, you have plenty of space even for a wide sleeping pad, and up here at the top, there's enough space for gear, your backpack, and so on. As I go about putting the fly on the tent here, you'll see that the fly buckles into the tent itself. This makes the entire setup process very simple, but at the same time, it adds quite a bit of weight to this tent. Speaking of which, this tent weighs 4 pounds, 6.2 ounces. And when it comes to the materials, you're looking at a 70-75 aluminum for the stakes. The tent has 2 aluminum poles. The fly is a 185T polyester that has a 2,000 millimeter hydrostatic head rating. The mesh is a 185T poly as well. The floor is a combination of materials, a 68 denier and a 190T polyester, and it has a 5,000 millimeter hydrostatic head rating. In addition to the tent, the fly, the poles, the stakes, and so on, you also receive a ground sheet with this tent. The truth is, everybody, this is a rather heavy one-person tent, and because the footprint adds so much weight to this tent, I went ahead and I got rid of it, and I'm using something else that's lighter weight. Talking about price here for a second, when I purchased this tent, it was $90. At the time of filming now, it is $112. On the MountainsSmith website, it runs $180. As far as the testing goes that I've done with this tent, I've been testing it out since September 2023. I used it towards the end of summer, throughout the fall, sometimes in the winter. It really depended on the weather. Naturally, this is not a 4th season tent, but whenever the weather was nice, I did test this out. Additionally, I've continued to test this out throughout the spring. Now I'm ready to give you all my pros and cons. Let's start with the pros. So first off, for the money, the quality of this tent is very good. I've had no issues with it. The seam work is great, the seam tape is great. There's absolutely no issues here. In other words, this is a very well-made tent. Also, the durability of this tent has been excellent. Trip after trip, storm after storm, this tent keeps on going and it shows no sign of wear outside of being dirty. Without a doubt, it's held up very well as the seasons have changed. Once the tent has been set up, it is extremely stable. Speaking of which, it does take a lot of tent stakes to get this erect, but once you do, it's not going anywhere, and it doesn't matter how strong the winds are. It goes without saying, folks, that I'm talking about 3-season conditions, of course. When it comes to the weather, this tent has been absolutely waterproof, and it doesn't matter how strong the storm has been. I have tested this out in ice, heavy rain, thunderstorms, extremely strong winds, and this tent has not let me down. As far as bivy style tents go, this is the most competent that I've personally tested out, and I've tested out quite a few. This tent handles the weather like it's absolutely nothing. Now luckily, inside of the tent there's quite a bit of space in there, so you could be inside of that tent during a storm, during a rain event, and it doesn't feel so small that you're going to feel like you're inside of a coffin like it does with some bivy tents. Inside of this tent there's enough space for one person plus gear, and in a pinch you could even use your stove inside of this tent. You can heat up some water real quick as long as you're very careful. There's that much space inside of it, namely up at the front where you enter and exit the tent. Speaking of entering and exiting the tent, the door is large, so it's easy to get into and out of this tent. With the zippers for the fly and also for the door, they are very smooth and they've given me no issues. As far as a stealth tent goes, this does a pretty good job. I will say that it's not the lowest profile of tent, but for me personally, I like having the extra space up at the top. I can sit up, change clothes, I can have a stove next to me, being very careful of course, along with good ventilation, but having that extra space does present you with extra options. You can easily keep all of your gear inside of the tent with you, which you need to consider because there's no vestibule space with this tent. Having the higher peak up here at the front does allow you to sit up and to change clothes, and that's nice. Oftentimes when it comes to bivy style tents, you can't do that. Try laying down and putting on your jacket at home, folks. Tell me if you like that. I personally don't. It is extremely hard to do. Luckily, changing clothes, putting on a jacket inside of this tent, it's no big deal. Next everybody, when it comes to the color of this tent, I like it. In my opinion, this is a good color for a stealth camping tent. What we have here is a brownish, greenish sort of color, which I like. Additionally, my friends, this tent comes with a lifetime warranty, so if you ever have an issue, the company should take care of you. Also, I like the fact that a ground sheet is included, but it does add quite a bit of weight. Next, when it comes to the setup process, it is very simple. There really is nothing to it. You stake it out, you put up the poles, clip it on, put it on the fly, you're done. It's that simple. Without a doubt, there are bivy style tents out there that are going to make you work much harder to set them up. This is a fairly large size bivy style tent, and for the money, it does make sense. There's a good value there. I know what you're thinking, folks. This tent sounds good so far. What are the cons? Well, folks, let's get to them. The biggest con, in my opinion, with this tent is the lack of ventilation and condensation. Because the fly basically goes down alongside the body straight down to the ground, getting airflow underneath that fly is difficult. Because there's a lack of airflow, you're going to have condensation. This is, without a doubt, a bad offender when it comes to condensation. It's not the worst I've ever tested, but it's not great. This tent will keep you 100% dry, but unfortunately, condensation is going to form big time on the inside of this tent. Luckily, you do have quite a bit of space inside of this shelter. So unless it's really windy, you shouldn't have much of an issue with the moisture falling inside of the tent or coming into contact with the mesh walls or the fabric walls. That is another con when it comes to this tent. The company decided to go the cheap route. So they put some mesh on the inner along with a lot of fabric, and that fabric holds in heat. And unfortunately, in the warmer months, this tent is a little bit hot. And that's because you have this combination of mesh and fabric holds in heat. It limits airflow. Basically, it does everything that you do not want a 3-season tent to do. It would be my advice for the company to re-release this tent. Get rid of all that fabric. If they have to, raise the price. Because all they're doing is making for a tent that's difficult to use in the warmest of conditions. I wish I knew what the company was thinking when they made this tent. Were they thinking, okay, let's put the fabric in there to keep the price low? Or are they thinking, let's put the fabric in there so we can keep more money for ourselves? I don't know which way it was, but either way, putting fabric all over this tent was a bad idea. Also, the company needs to think about a way to pull the fly away from the body so that you can get some airflow underneath that fly. This is not a 4-season tent. The company knows this. So why does the fly go all the way down to the ground? There's basically no separation between the fly and the body. And again, that limits airflow. You're not going to feel a breeze coming underneath that fly unless you're out on a mountaintop and it's blowing like 15 miles an hour or higher. Because of those factors, my friends, I would recommend using this tent in nice conditions. Basically, take this out on trips where it's not supposed to rain. If it does rain, you'll be fine. This tent is going to shine on trips where the conditions are nice. You have the fly rolled back, you have some cool air coming through the mesh at the door. That is when this tent is going to shine. It is not going to shine for wet conditions. And that's because condensation is going to be so bad with this tent due to poor airflow and ventilation. Another con that I should mention again is the lack of vestibule space. All of the gear has to go on the inside with you. Luckily, there's a lot of space on the inside, so it shouldn't be a problem. Another big issue with this tent is weight. This is a 1-person bivy style tent, which means that it's smaller than your typical tent. This comes in at over 4 pounds. And this is partially due to the decisions that the company made. First off, the company went with very inexpensive polyester materials that are very heavy. They are waterproof, but they're very heavy. The tent has buckles all over it and also has very thick, very heavy straps. Because of all of this, not only is the tent heavy, but it's also rather large. For a one-person bivy style tent, the overall storage bag is huge on this tent. The last con that I have for this tent is the overall odd shape. I do not understand what the company was doing here. There are all sorts of strange angles. I just don't know. I really have no clue what the company was thinking here. All they've done is just taken away space by cutting off this side here. It's a design that I've never seen before. I hope I never see again, because in the end, it doesn't really benefit the user at all. It just takes away space. I love when a company thinks outside of the box, but it's gotta make sense. In this case here, all of these weird angles, it just does not make any sense at all. And right there you have it, my friends. That is my review of this MountainsSmith tent. Make sure to comment down below and share your thoughts. What do you all think about this shelter? Is this something that you would personally consider? Do you like the overall design? I've never seen a company design a tent with such funky angles on it before. It feels like a product that has been held back by the company. They made some really strange decisions here that have not benefited the user at all. I mean, with just a little bit more thought and care, they could have released a product that, sure, costs a little bit more, but offered the user a much better experience. Folks, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the thumbs up. It does help a lot. Again, this channel is agenda free. I don't care if you buy this. I don't care if you don't. It means nothing to me. What I'm doing here is sharing information. I'm sharing experiences, and that's that. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the thumbs up before you go. I appreciate it. Everybody take care. Be well. Strength and honor. Bye for now.